To order, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I was informed that there is no public comment. Moving on to item number 4, approval of the December 7th, 2023 committee meeting minutes. I have a motion by Supervisor Seubert, second by Supervisor Robinson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, policy issue discussion, potential committee determination. Item A, ATV, UTV biannual review, possible additional routes. Commissioner Griesbach.
Thank you. First off, I would like to apologize for this item. It should have been just under education after rereading the ordinance and had a discussion with Lance and Michael. This is more for general education. There's not going to be any action needed, but part of the ordinance, and I know this committee has asked for a report because it has been 2 years. So I've asked Officer Van Orphan from the Sheriff's Department, who was or is still the ATV, UTV. He's in transition, I know, to Ted Connect's position. So he always will give you a report on what has been actually happening out there, what he has seen. I believe for myself, I'm pleasantly surprised of what's happened out there. But Michael, if you want to handle a report.
For me, it's good evening, everyone. I just work night shifts, so bear with me here. So I ran the numbers from last year, and we actually conducted 570 hours of ATV-specific patrol in the county. From those patrols, we issued 20 citations and 50 warnings. There were only 6 reportable ATV crashes that were actually reported to us on our county highways, or I should say all highways in the county. That would include county and township. And one of those was a fatality. Of the citations we wrote, common violations we've seen were not having safety certificates, which is basically the DNR's version of a driver's license. Illegal operation on a highway, which include operating on a highway that's closed to ATVs or operating in an illegal manner on that highway, including speeding is lumped into that statute. Couple registration violations, couple age violations, those under the age of 16. 2 OWI related violations. One person decided to try and flee on his ATV as law enforcement tried to stop him, and one operating in a careless manner. Other one that is common that we stop for but we don't give many citations on as well as includes lighting violations and having people have their lights on, which is mandated by law. So that's just a breakdown of a couple of the violations we've seen. For the one fatal crash that we had, a brief synopsis of that. This was a elderly gentleman who was on his way to his tree stand during I believe the gun deer season, or actually no, correction on that, the bow season. He was on his way, swerved to miss an animal in the road. His son was actually following him in a truck and saw the incident happen. When he swerved, he lost control of the ATV. It rolled and he was ejected due to trauma. He later died in the hospital. So nothing that was involving another car or anything like that. So single unit. That's a brief synopsis of what we've done. We do have 2 guys, Deputy Brian Madrusky and Deputy Tyler Bramer, who took over my position as rec deputy when I was promoted to patrol lieutenant. I'm now basically in charge of those 2 guys, so continuity still stands, and that's where I'm taking over from Ted Connect for our structure in the sheriff's office. We are still ramping up ATV patrols. We're trying to get more DNR hours in on those types of patrols due to just the common use of it. With it, we were focusing a lot on boat and snowmobile patrols because of those seasons are typically limited as far as time that we can do those patrols, especially this year for snowmobile. But ATV is open year round. So we're actually trying to make sure that we can focus on those ATV patrols a little bit more during those times that we are also patrolling snowmobiles and boating. So I'm sure you'll see more hours being patrolled as well. Just any questions on what we're doing at the sheriff's office?
Supervisor Robinson?
Are you noticing more ATV issues this winter with the trails, snowmobile trails not open?
Currently, right now, we're actually not. And it's actually surprising. I would figure because people cannot get out on their sleds that they would try and get out and have fun on their ATVs. So,
Any additional questions by anyone? No? Thank you for the report. Thank you for being on top of getting us the report for that. I know it was a very significant discussion that we had on that. But thank you. And glad to see that it's not being a dangerous endeavor, because I know that certainly was a concern for the Sheriff's Department, so, and all of us. Mr. Griesbach.
In follow-up, we have seen very little damage to the roadways. I know I had some concerns about, the shoulders or something like that. So we've seen very little. I know on the Town of Day, Tom had mentioned to me that the Town of Day had seen some damage a while back, but I don't know if that's still continuing, but
It was straightened out, we just put on Facebook, if it continues, they're gonna be closed. It was stolen signs. A week later, the signs were put back up, so.
So since we opened the system up, there were some townships that opened up. The ones I am aware of, I believe the townships that have opened up since we implemented this is the town of Gunther, Rib Falls, Brighton, and most recently the town of Satine. I don't know if Rib Mountain, I know, is considering it, but as of right now, the last two townships that do not have any roads open is the town of Marathon and Rib Mountain. Otherwise, everybody has some or partially. I believe we're going to get an update from Rib Mountain.
Rib Mountain, the village of Rib Mountain did approve ATVs on a portion of basically the area outside of the water district, the utilities. So the area around Lilac and on either side of KK. However, they can't ride down KK because that's the ADL is too high there, and they can't go anywhere now because 9 miles. The road through 9 Mile doesn't allow ATVs anymore.
All right, we'll talk offline. I'll need some information from you for that, and so does the DNR. So we are down to a half a village and one township not open at this point. With the town of Satine opening, we are opening up a segment of Highway O from U north. We are not opening U south of Highway U because that falls into the MPO box. With part of our ordinance, we don't have anything in our MPO box that's open. And we are opening County Trunk Highway O from 107 to U again because the town of Satine has this recently opened. We did have one other request, and we did the traffic counts, and it falls in our falls within it. So we're opening up 1.3 miles of Highway Z from Burger Lane to Owl Ridge Road. The local group over there is going to put a little trail in from Burger Lane to serve the rest of the residents over in the town of Wausau. So we are opening up 3 more segments of road within the next couple of weeks. So that pretty much includes a report for the ATV, UTV.
Okay. Thank you for the update. Any additional questions? All right. Thank you. Moving on then to item B, which is the update to the mailbox policy. Commissioner.
Thank you. We, at this time, we ran into some issues with the policy at the 11th hour, so we'll be bringing it back for full approval probably in April because the March agenda already is quite full. But to give you an update, what we're looking at, and we'll continue the process of finishing the policy unless there's any objection from the committee. Currently, what we do is if we get a report of a mailbox being hit, our current policy is if the snow takes that mailbox down, we do not replace it. The mailbox needs to be able to handle flying snow off the plow. So if we physically do hit the plow, which does happen maybe 20 to 25 times a year, where our plow can't get over if they're meeting a vehicle or just trying to clean the shoulder too close, we do occasionally hit these mailboxes. We'll go out there and replace them with this standard metal mailbox, nothing fancy, just the cheap ones you buy at your local hardware store. Even though the mailbox is only about $30, time we send a couple guys out there with our truck, we're a big county, so sometimes travel's quite large. We have about $340 in a mailbox to be replaced. Time we go out there, place one, get a hole drilled, and put a new post in. So what we're proposing, and we're going to come back again at a later time, we ran into a little bit of issue. We're working through things with finance. We had talked about giving a $100 choice. Either we'll come out and replace them if you're unable to, because a lot of times we'll have somebody say they're elderly and they can't replace the mailbox. We'll come out there and replace the mailbox with a standard metal mailbox. However, one of the bigger complaints we've been getting lately is a lot of people have gone to larger mailboxes with the amount of online purchasing and their Amazon purchases can't fit into standard mailboxes. So a lot of them are going to the bigger mailboxes, and we still have the policy. So what we're proposing is to say you have your choice of a standard mailbox that we'll put in, or we will give you a $100 gift card to either Fleet Farm or Menards to go out and purchase your own mailbox and put it in. With that, we working right now. I talked to Michael this morning from Corp Counsel for them to have a waiver. They're going to draft up a waiver for them to sign, and then we'll also give them directions of proper installation so it's installed the right distance from the edge line and the right height for the mail person to do it. It'd be a savings for us if we can go this route, and it'll make a lot of people happy because a lot of times when they call, they're not real happy that their big Rubbermaid mailbox is now being replaced with a small standard metal mailbox. So unless there's any objections, we are going to pursue this and bring it back for formal adoption and probably at the April meeting.
Okay, any questions?
That's us.
The only thought I would have is, you said our cost is about $350, and then we're going to give someone $100, is just to consider what because you'd be looking at minimum replacement cost, right? Just kind of consider what that might be. Maybe $100 might be low. I don't know. I mean, you have just a thought.
I actually purchased one myself because my wife does a lot of ordering on Amazon. The mailbox themselves run about $65 to $70. So it's $35 for installation. Our biggest cost is the time running out there, the vehicle cost and everything. But so basically we're giving them $65 for a mailbox and $35 from the install, depending on the cost.
Any other questions? We don't need to take action on this then.
No, we'll bring it back
Because
for
you're gonna bring
formal
it back,
adoption
correct?
once we have the waiver from Corp Counsel.
All right, very good. Thank you. All right, moving on then to item 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. Item A, opportunity providing recommendations relative to items to be included in the administrator's 2024 annual work plan. Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in your packet is the 2023 work plan. I'm not going to go through it. I just included it for information. I know you've seen it before. It's the end of year annual update. This is really just an opportunity for all of the members of each of the standing committees, because I am going to each standing committee, to just provide some insight onto what each of you think, what the committees think would be large items that we should focus on. And that I can then include in my draft work plan for evaluation by the full board later this month and perhaps even into next month. But I do just want to highlight a couple of what I am terming carryover projects, or projects that I think would be of interest to this committee that are that I'm going to at least include in my draft work plan. In connection with revising our master facilities plan for the board as an informational update, I think it's important to note one of the budget items you approved in 2024 is the selection of an asset management software system, with the idea that it's going to be shared across multiple departments here at the county, and then also the city of Wausau and North Central Healthcare. So that's a large project. It's something that I think would be very helpful, not only for facilities, but also for the highway department to be able to get some of those pieces, those assets into that system, so that we can better assess our long-term CIP costs. Another large one that this committee is very has been involved in is the presentation to the county board of a theoretical financial and operational plan for a new highway department shop construction. Jim, my deputy Chris, and I met, is that last week or this week? Last Thursday, to kind of start to put together the plan to do that in terms of what the presentation might look like, to gather some additional information. I know that's been a topic of consideration at this committee since my first day in county administration about 8 years ago. So that is going to be kind of one of those carryover projects as well. Similarly, and very much related to that, is fund balance. We are finalizing our fund balance, the initial balances, and we'll provide an update to the board and quarterly financial updates to standing committees to see where we are with respect to budget to actual, which I know has been a long-standing request. So we hope to be able to do that beginning in May of 2024 for the quarterly financial updates, and we should have those fund balance reports hopefully in March. And then the last piece is a brief carryover project, and that is related to the next item on your agenda, the Assemblies Work Group. Thank you again to each of the supervisors that have assisted in that effort. I think we have a very solid draft for consideration to the board, but those are just some of those carryover projects. And then really I'm here to listen if the committee has other items that you're seeing that you want us to include in a work plan, or challenges within the community that you think should be evaluated in the next year that would make its way on the work plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Administrator. Questions, comments relative to the work plan? I think that wraps it up. So, unless Craig has something online.
No, thank you. It was covered very well.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Moving on to item B then, Marathon County Assembly's Ordinance 1204, review of draft updates and consideration of forwarding to county board.
All right. I just want to give a quick overview of kind of what we've been through and why we're doing it. The large assembly ordinance update. There was a review done by Corporation Counsel that our existing 12.04 ordinance could potentially be found, some items could be found unconstitutional. So what had happened is we had formed a work group. This work group consisted of ERC, Infrastructure Committee, Public Safety Committee, as well as staff from CPZ, Health Department, Highway, Sheriff's Office, and Parks. We did provide a first draft. That work group came up with a first draft, which is what we presented to this committee in October of 23. We did send it to the townships for input. And then we came back, like I said, we presented to the three standing committees for their input. With that input, the work group came back together and addressed the comments that were received, and I'll go through some of those comments here in a second. And through those comments and those updates, it's what the work group came up with the draft that's in front of you in your packet today. So just some review of the comments, some big ones. The townships, the biggest comment was how would they be able to participate in the process. The way CPZ handles a lot of our stuff right now is we keep the towns in the loop when zoning permits come in, so it'd be very similar to that process. If we get an application for an assemblies event, the town would be notified. And then also that item that was put in the ordinance is a appeals process, which a township would be able to appeal if they felt there was a health and safety concern. With the appeals process, an aggrieved party can end up appealing, but the key is it can't be based on content of the event. It would have to be based on a public health and safety item as to why they're appealing that event. Just some items we received from the committee at the committee level. While we were presenting the last time, ERC did ask us to reach out to a few of the event holders in Marathon County for this process, which included the Edgar Steam Show. We do have a representative from the Edgar Steam Show here today, as well as the Taste and Glow. And they were invited to come to the work group meetings and participate in those discussions as well. A few things that came out of those discussions. One was it gave the work group a better understanding of some of the language that was in the ordinance being somewhat confusing. And those items were addressed in the ordinance, as well as an FAQ was developed to help answer and address those questions and concerns, making it a little bit easier to understand the ordinance and the intent of the ordinance. As well as there was some concerns about the potential security requirements that are in the ordinance, the 3 per 1,000. There was a lot of discussion in the work group and the sheriff's office, and we do have representatives from the sheriff's office here as well. But the ordinance is intended not necessarily for events that, there's like the Steam Show, for example, has been around for a while, and they've planned and they have all these steps. They're doing 95% of what the ordinance is asking for already. It's for those kind of pop-up events or events that haven't had much opportunity for planning. It would still apply to the Steam Show, but it's designed more to help guide individuals that are planning larger events, making sure they have a safe event. So with talks with the sheriff's office, the security measure was we decided to keep it in the ordinance. Just kind of moving on a little bit, and if the sheriff's office does want to speak a little bit more to the security portion, feel free, or if there's questions later on. We can kind of move on to another aspect, which would be fee recovery for the county. For example, if the highway department is asked to assist for an event, whether it's a road closure or a electronic sign, those would be added costs essentially to an event or to the county, because the county wouldn't normally have those types of things out on that particular day for that particular reason. So there was a extraordinary services section added to the ordinance, which essentially would have the applicant get a separate contract for those services. There were several comments that we had that didn't directly get addressed in our ordinance. We felt there was a lot of them that could be handled just with guidance documents and application materials. For example, just common practice as far as guidance documents for number of toilets or things like that. We felt that didn't need to specifically be in the ordinance, but guidance documents would be developed to kind of help individuals plan and meet those requirements. Again, the FAQ, I think, is a very good tool for individuals. And as time goes on, I can assure you that FAQ will keep getting updated, because as we would go through this ordinance, if it should be adopted, there's going to be other questions that pop up that we may have not have thought about, and we can address in a future FAQ as well. So last Tuesday, we did bring this in front of the ERC committee. They did have a request of the 1-year review of the ordinance to see how it's working in 1 year. And then as far as kind of the action. We're looking for the committee to consider forwarding the draft that we see here on the county board. And we'd be happy to ask any questions, or if Administrator Leonard wants to add anything.
I'll be very brief. We did pretty much the same presentation earlier this week to the Environmental Resources Committee, and one question that was asked that I think might be helpful is, again, that idea that, as Shad was talking about, the STEAM show's been in existence for a long time, that, what is really the intent of this ordinance, and it is, as Shad said, it's to provide that baseline information and hopefully be helpful to all events that are coming in. And the question that was asked was, well, how many events do we have? Is this really an area in which there's a need for an ordinance? And that, of course, is within the purview of the board. I just provided some context for it. This actually, again, started before I was appointed by the board as administrator. This discussion was happening in 2018, 2019. And there was this concern about a proliferation of events, particularly outdoor recreation, whether it's the Wausau Marathon and growth in that. There was a push to have some triathlon events with large numbers of individuals, and then the growth of Iron Bowl and those other events, and to make sure that we had something in place, particularly that addressed the assemblies, but also the second part of what Shad alluded to, which was that fee recovery idea, whether if we have a department that is requested to, if it's the sheriff's office provides traffic control at a county highway intersection, or Jim's folks from highway being asked to deploy dynamic signs. So I think the ordinance does those things, so that's a little bit more of the context. The last thing, again, I thought the work group structure has worked very well with the different perspectives from the different committees. Certainly a significant thank you to the STEAM show. And Mr. Banky is here again to answer questions if should you have any from their perspective. Certainly, I think Mr. Banky shared at ERC, like the question was, hey, is there a benefit to the STEAM show? Right now, I think he'd say, look, it's more paperwork. And I don't dispute that. It's new paperwork. They have, as Shad alluded to, 95+% of everything that the ordinance talks about, they're already doing. It's hopefully getting it in a single application, and long-term, I think that's a benefit, that instead of an event holder, particularly a new event getting started, knowing that they need to go to multiple different places. I mean, the STEAM show knows how to do it. They go to the health department for camping. They know all the places they need to go to get their event approved. I think one of the benefits of the way we have this structured based on the work group's work is that it's a single place where those applications come in. And there was a good suggestion made during ERC about having, it's operational, it's not in the ordinance, but it's the idea of when we get that application, we essentially hold a round table of all the impacted departments to get feedback to the event holder as promptly as possible, which I thought was a very good piece of feedback. And I think the application guide and the FAQ are certainly important, and conservation planning and zoning is working on that. But the last part about the 1 year kind of sunset, I think it was termed at the work group or certainly at ERC, that's not in the proposed ordinance right now. So if there is a desire to have a date at which the ordinance would sunset absent some further action of the board, you would need to add that. Or you could put it in, I think Corp Council shared at ERC, you could put that in the authorizing resolution. But I just wanted to be very clear, that's not in here. Certainly, I think that's a great idea. It's always a good idea to, like Jim did earlier with the UTV discussion, come back and have a check-in and see how it works. I hope in 1 year we have good feedback. It's going to be the most painful year, of course. But I think that's a very good practice, but I want to be very clear, that's not in the draft ordinance right now.
Questions, comments from the board? Yeah, if the committee wishes, please.
I requested Mr. Benke be allowed to comment.
You covered most of it. Some of you have been out there, it's just a lot of you haven't. Our biggest concern is probably the paperwork. The ratio of 3 per 1,000 for security, I think that's excessive. I mean, we only had a sheriff department out there in the 50-plus years we've been out there once that I know of. So I'd like to know where that come from. Is that somebody's opinion or is this law? It's one of the things.
So I can talk a little bit to that. And I don't know at the last work group meeting, excuse me, Phil Rentmeester was going to get back to us on some FEMA regulations because I believe that's where that came from. But I'm not 100% sure. I believe that that's where that came from. I don't know if Phil ever got back to anybody at CPZ or not on that, but it's my recollection that that's where that came from. I know, and I talked about this a little bit at one of the previous meetings, a work group meeting, that the Wausau Police Department, in their accreditation process, their standards were much higher of the per capita. The event, when it was held in Wausau, they were required to have roughly 20 officers on scene for the number of people in attendance. So that's through an accreditation that the Wausau Police Department had. That number did not come from the sheriff's office, so I don't know exactly where that came from. I just know, and just be mindful, and I think we spoke to this a little bit in the past, is that we don't anticipate a lot of problems from the Edgar Steam Show, but this ordinance covers anybody who's wanting to come here. So we don't know what that may be, what that may look like, what group may want to put on an assembly. It may be something that's much more contentious, that may need a lot more security. So that was part of going into, you know, I can tell you from a law enforcement perspective, we wouldn't want one officer at an event where there's 1,000 people per se. We go to a bar fight, it's a minimum of a 2-car call. Just for an example, you know, you just don't know what you're going into, and it's quickly can get out of hand or escalate. Not the Steam Show. I totally understand. You guys have been, for the most part, no problems out there. But that's the unfortunate thing, is this does not have the ability to segregate an ordinance for the Steam Show, an ordinance for maybe a rock concert, or something else that may apply for permitting here in the county.
If I can add one thing, I thought, again, the work group discussion was really fruitful because, as Chad shared before, sometimes it was language, what we had in the ordinance conveyed a belief that wasn't certainly what I believe to be the intent of the supervisors on the work group. Security, the ordinance requires individuals to be designated as security, and the real primary requirement right now for them is to undergo essentially a background check through the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Standards. And Bill can correct me, but my recollection was you said it was $27 for 5 years?
Yeah, it's $27 to get permitted. If you need a temporary permit because you are short-sighted and the event is closer, they issue a temporary permit, a background, and the license. That cost then goes up to $45. If you let it lapse after the 5 years, then it goes up to, I believe, $52 to get reinstated.
So the idea is, and the Steam Show does this, Mr. Benke had referenced this at one of the work group meetings, they have their volunteers. It's really the next step. This is in probably one of those areas of the 5% that we were talking about, identifying those individuals and designating them as security, having the background check. I mean, it's that piece of work that might be the additional part. It's not go hire the sheriff's office or Wausau PD. That's not or any law enforcement entity. Certainly, an event, should they deem it appropriate, can go contract with a private security entity if they wish, but that's not under the ordinance. Again, I think that the conversation think we all truly, Steam Show has been so helpful just in talking this through. But I think that's where that security piece came to. It's this idea of a background check. And there was, I think Sheriff Billup made some points at the last work group meeting about, it's helpful depending on the event and who you have designated as a volunteer, particularly for security. It's good to know if the individual has certain background, law enforcement contacts that may raise concerns about their ability to safely and appropriately provide that. Again, not saying that that's the Steam Show's issue, but I can imagine if you're putting on a new event for the first time and you're looking for as many volunteers as you can get, that vetting process through Department of Safety and Professional Standards is helpful because, I don't think you'd want somebody, you referenced a bar fight, Bill. I don't think that would be a very good idea from a liability perspective if you employed someone for security that had a substantial number of convictions relative to battering people.
So along those lines, how does the security fit within what you're doing now? Just trying to piggyback off of what Administrator Leonard is saying.
What we do now is we have volunteer members, and in the evening, because we do have music at night, we hire a security service come in at night. And I believe it's 3 or 4 for the evening. They go from like 6 till midnight. 6 till 6 in the morning. So after this place is closed even, they're overnight.
So would the ordinance as written now require you to have more persons doing that?
More during the day.
Okay.
Because I would say, we get to have 12,000 people come for a 3-day weekend. So, and the biggest days are Fridays and Saturdays. And during the day, we'd probably have to add, I would say, probably 4 people during the day, each day, except Sunday.
Mr. Banky, you have, I think in the work group meeting you referenced, you have a number of volunteers that are present all day those days?
That's correct, yes.
So it's really designating those individuals as the security. It's not, I don't think the ordinance would require you to have additional people beyond the volunteers you have. It's just designating those on-site volunteers as security and having that background check. Am I thinking of that? Shad's nodding appropriate. So it's a nuanced difference.
Right, it's getting the people to come in to go through the paperwork, and we got to pay up the fees and stuff. So to make it official, make it look good on the document.
Did you have additional comment?
No, I don't.
It was just about security. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Additional comments? Supervisor Sorbert.
Thank you. Does Marathon County have enough manpower? And just a question. Stratford's having a farm progress days in a couple of years. There might be 12,000 people there in a day. So that would require an awful amount of security. And that runs, I believe, 3 days or maybe only 2. But if I come to the county and say, hey, provide security, can the county do that? And if the county can't and I can't find enough security, what's the next step?
That's a really good question. Sheriff Billup brought up farm progress days at ERC earlier this week, which was news to me. So one thing, starting with the location, you referenced Stratford. I think it's important to reference within the ordinance. This only applies in the unincorporated areas of the county. So because the city of Wausau, the village of Rib Mountain, all those villages have the ability to regulate in that area, the county cannot. So depending on location, this ordinance might not even apply. With respect to the manpower question, if there's a request for the sheriff's office or for the highway department to provide those services, that's that extraordinary services section that Shad referenced. There was discussion about having a fee schedule within the ordinance. My sense is that makes the ordinance really complex. Like, hey, this is what we're going to charge for this particular service. Ultimately, the work group kind of fell on the side of If you're making those requests to the county, that's fine. Those things are governed by an external contract that you would sign, which is, we're very familiar with in other instances when we have to sign those contracts. I'll certainly defer to the sheriff's office on manpower and what that might look like. But under the ordinance, the security requirement is not that someone needs to be it's not a private security requirement or you need to be sworn law enforcement. It's that you need to designate individuals. Essentially, it's like a security plan, right? Like you have a plan of these individuals, how many are going to serve as security. The requirement relative to licensure is that go through the background check that the state requires, and it's good for 5 years, $27, provided you hit all the timelines that Bill referenced. But I'll certainly defer to the sheriff's office on the manpower side.
Just kind of going back to when Farm Progress Days was out at the CA for Farm, I can't remember, was that like 2011, something like that. We certainly had a presence there, a large presence there, and they were paying us at our contracted rate because they wanted sworn law enforcement on the premises. An event that's that far out, we can plan for staffing between our reserve deputy program and actually assigning full-time deputies. That's typically augmented by either they hire a private security firm at a reduced rate, especially for the overnight hours, or they will, an auxiliary police department that they've utilized in the past. I think this gives another avenue that typically I don't think we've explored, is designating somebody who actually has gone through a vetting process, who doesn't have to be a sworn law enforcement officer. And then we would certainly, they had their own parking. They didn't want to pay us to do parking and stuff like that. So in that event, I was involved in that one. We did have a pretty substantial, we had our communications center out there with WIM and their big communications trailer. I mean, it was set up like its own little city. So we certainly are available to do that with manpower. We just, obviously, as much lead time as possible so we can maintain road coverage.
Additional questions?
Thank you, Chair. I have another what if. Roselleville is unincorporated. They have an annual wing ding every year. Does it bring 1,000 people? It could. They have live music at night. What is that going to curtail of what they have to do being unincorporated?
How long does that event take place? Does it ever reach 3,000 people at any one time?
No.
Okay, then it wouldn't fall under this ordinance. Yep, if it has to be 3,000 people over an 8-hour period at one time or an aggregate.
Okay.
So that wouldn't apply. If there's any local regulations, that would still apply. Like, for example, the steam show. If this ordinance is not approved, they would still fall under the county zoning ordinance, which they've been doing for years, being that they're in a county zone town.
Additional questions? The only thing, Supervisor Robinson, go ahead, please.
So ERC had raised the issue of the sunset or review. I think that the discussion was, do we have a review? And given the fact that this is currently a three committees of jurisdiction or interest with infrastructure, and ours was more the burden, and Supervisor Straub and myself represent infrastructure on that work group, but the burden on Jim and his crews to get the markings out there and traffic control, and both in terms of set up and sometimes the day of the event, and that's through the extraordinary agreement. So I don't know that we would have an ongoing interest in looking at public safety, looks at it from the law enforcement side, and then environmental resources looks at it from the overall zoning code perspective. Would we, just to trying to move it along, I don't know that there would be a reason for this committee to necessarily review it unless there were some issues. Maybe, Lance, if you could, through the review with the department heads of those various things, funnel it to the appropriate committees. But I think there needs to be a mechanism, and my preference would be for a review on a regular basis and a report back to a committee. And so that review could perhaps take place on an annual basis with a report to the Environmental Resources Committee just to get some clarification. The lack of clarification leads to nothing being done. And that could be part of the authorizing resolution.
So you're making a proposal to add that to?
I would.
Or are you just making a comment, Supervisor?
Is this formally before us for approval, or is it formally before? I would move that as part of the to recommend adoption of the ordinance, and as part of the resolution, put in a requirement that there be an annual review through the Environmental Resources Committee of the ordinance.
We have a motion. Second by Supervisor Gisselman. Any further discussion on that?
Chris, this is Craig.
Go ahead, Craig.
I guess my question is who would be in charge of the review? Is that the ERC committee, or would that be up to staff?
The motion was for the review to be done by the department heads, or the and
I think the
then
intent was to have
sent
ERC
to, but
and-
sent to ERC. Is that correct? So done by administration, so to speak, and then sent to ERC for their review.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the comment I would have is, are you thinking just for simplicity to send it to this one group? Because what if public safety needs to be involved based upon the recommendations from the sheriff's department or something like that? You just want to, you're just trying to get it to one committee to review and then reach out to other committees if needed? Is that fair?
The intent is to give it a place, because if the lack of clarity breeds lack of accountability. So I think what we're trying to do is ERC can then reach out to any and all standing committees. If there were, for instance, a number of issues that did affect infrastructure that we didn't look at, I would expect that they would engage us. And the same thing with public safety. But again, it's a zoning code. I'm looking for a place, and I would expect that administration would want to, if there were issues with it, brief the appropriate standing committees relative to those issues going forward. But again, it needs to be housed somewhere, and therefore I think ERC is the appropriate committee.
All right, thank you. The only other comment that I was going to make and question I had is, is there alcohol served at the STEAM show? Is that during the day or just during the music?
I can speak to that. We serve beer. Edgar Steam Club actually has a tavern license. We purchased one a few years back. We did serve margaritas at one time, not margaritas, excuse me. I can't think of the name of it. It's a morning drink with the tomatoes and
Bloody Mary.
Bloody Marys, that's it. The Bloody Marys. We used to serve Bloody Marys, but we've discontinued that. Yep. Anyway, so we serve beer all day and into the evening. I shouldn't say all day. I think it starts at noon, something like that, and then into the evening. We close up at 11, and like I said, we have security at 6 in the morning, and we do have a tavern license, but we also apply every year to the township for what you call a picnic license for an event.
Just to clarify why I'm asking the question is, I had the thought of, could there possibly be an alcohol-related provision to the assembly based upon how much security you would need? So if there wasn't alcohol served, maybe you need less security. But if there is alcohol served, based upon like your similar comment, if you go to a bar, you need two cars. But maybe if you're going to a domestic situation, maybe it's only one. If you can comment on that.
I guess my comment would be that being in a reactive state is not a good place with that large of a gathering. I would rather see a number of people there prepared in the event that something does happen. From a county perspective, our minimum staffing for deputies on the road to cover all 1,500 square miles is 5 deputies. So if we got called upon, it would exhaust all of our resources for something that big if there was an event. And I just think, even along the lines of not always thinking something bad happens, but security being able to help with weather event related stuff. You know, if you've got a tornado coming and getting people evacuated, things like that, I think your security personnel could help in situations like that.
If I can add one thing, I think your point is spot on, that idea that every event is different, and the work groups spent a fair amount of time talking about that. So you'll see, and this was brought up at ERC, there's a fair number of places within the ordinance where it uses words like sufficient or adequate, because to your point, Chair Dickinson, if you have an event that, I think Bill brought up, a rock concert that is serving a significant amount of alcohol as opposed to the steam show, which is largely, it's a family-friendly event. Those plans may be different, but the ordinance allows for, I think Corp Council termed it like the idea of a reasonableness test, that, you know, you have a conversation with the organizer and they come up with a plan. And also CPZ in their discussions with the work group, I think we have a really long, substantial track record of, you know, working with events. If an event thinks they're going to hit 3,200 people and 7,000 show up, you know, it's not like we're going to be out there issuing citations. It's, hey, we'll deal with that next year in your application. It's this idea that we want people to come up with a plan. Hey, what are you going to do if you have an extra 10%, 20%, 30% people show up? So I think on your specific question about security, depending on the nature of the event, that determination of adequate and the size, right? I mean, your security total number might be less. It's really event specific.
Thank you for the explanations. I appreciate that. All right, any additional questions or comments? All right, otherwise we have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance 1204 with the addition of a statement regarding an annual review with a report to the ERC. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for the information and coming and explaining these things. All right, then moving on to item 7, educational presentations and committee discussion. Item A, bridge structure under 20 feet inventory and assessment program.
Thank you. This is a program that the state budgeted $12.5 million for an inventory and assessment of structures between 6 and 20 foot. This is both on our county system and all the local municipalities. The program is changing daily at this point. They just released it. I did send an email to all the clerks through Kim Trueblood yesterday, trying to explain it a little bit because it's ongoing and so it's changing rapidly. But to cut to the chase of it, the state realizes that there is an issue for these structures that aren't annually inspected, so that all the structures over 20 feet in the state are inspected when the county, by statute, the highway department is responsible for all those structures. The ones under 20 may have never been inspected ever, so there's some very old, some very bad structures out there. So what the state has set forth is they're looking first is the inventory. So everybody, each municipality needs to inventory all their structures between 6 and 20 foot, and that includes the county. Fortunately, we already have that inventory done. We're ahead of the game, so we have 221 of these structures on our county system. As far as the 66 municipalities, I have no idea what's out there. So the state said they will pay each municipality $100 per structure, and that includes even the ones that we have done already, to go inspect to inventory them. They're giving the municipalities 3 choices. A, they can do it themselves and get paid $100 per structure. B, they can hire somebody. Or C, they can have the county highway department do it. They never asked us that to start with, if we have the capacity to do that. If you're talking Pepin County, that might work. You're talking Marathon County, for me to go out to 66 municipalities and maybe find 800 structures, I don't have the time to do that. So I did send a letter again yesterday to the municipalities explaining their three choices and telling them that if Marathon County Highway Department needs to go do the inventory, we may or may not be able to do that depending on how many municipalities come forward. And they will be charged for anything over $100 because we're not going to eat that cost time I drive out to the town dispenser to do their inventory. I don't know their system as well as they do, so let's hope they decide to do that. The municipalities need to get back to the state by April 15th on their choice of how they want to do that. However, the county needs to contact the state before, was February 15th. We got to push back a couple weeks to March 15th. We need to let them know how we're going to handle the inspection of all these structures. So we need to let them know a month and a half before the towns need to tell them how they want to do it. The towns and the municipalities have until December 31st of this year, including us, to do the inventory of all the structures. So by March 1st, I need to tell the state if I'm going to do the inspection without knowing what the inspection form looks like or how many structures there are. So that's, and we'll get paid $350 per structure to do that. Again, so we'll have to do that. Again, this is just for information. After this is done, the inspections or assessments need to be completed by December 31st of 2025. At that point, the state legislators will again gather to see what the need is for the state of Wisconsin to appropriate some money to start fixing these structures. So at this time, we are probably going to take on that task of doing the inspections of all the structures in the county. I have been working with a firm that does a bridge inspection, KBIS, to come on board. If we can't handle them all, they'll do the inspection for us, probably less than $350 a piece. So we can still make some money by bringing KBIS on board to do these inspections at, I believe, $225. They're looking at the structure. So it's a big task that's going to happen over the next 2 years, but stay tuned for further details.
Any questions, anyone? All right, thanks for the information. Moving on to item B, CCIT update, key 2024 project plans. Mr. Klein.
Good morning. Just to give you a quick overview of what we'll be working on this year. With respect to Workday, we have a couple of projects that we plan to do later after go live. The first one is learning management. We'll be working on implementing learning management system. If you're not familiar with that term, what it is you can upload content and quizzes and then assign it to people and assign them schedules. So you might have, okay, everybody needs to review the OSHA safety instructions once a year. And you can assign it to specific people and then they take it and the managers can get a report on whether everybody did the work that they were assigned. That could apply to anything that we want to have done on any kind of cycle. We'll also be, we're already using ACH with the vendors at City County IT and Workday, and we need to implement that piece at the county in their finance team. And then we have some additional functionality we want to build with the P cards, which are what employees use to buy stuff, credit cards, basically. Once that's done completed, that'll be a completely automated process. So if I buy something with a company, if I'm traveling and I paid for a hotel with a credit card, the credit card, U.S. Bank basically can give us a file that we can upload directly into Workday and build some automation in it, so it's a lot more efficient to do expense reporting. And then Teller, you guys might have heard of that in the past. We implemented it's a software for handling cash and payments at counters. It's called the cashiering system. And we did a couple of interfaces when we implemented that, but we have a number of interfaces that we'd like to do. Interfaces with Teller allow us to automate it so that it's more efficient and there's less handwork done to do that. So we've got a couple of Teller integrations we're going to be doing this year. We have a whole bunch of cameras in this building in particular that are old analog cameras that need to be upgraded. We're going to be doing about 40 of them in the jail. I just met with it earlier this morning to kind of finalize that project, but there's still another like 60 in this building that are old analog cameras, so they'll be replaced with digital cameras. It's a little more complicated than you might think. It's not just pulling the camera off the wall. We actually have to replace the wiring because it's coax. You guys familiar with this in your house? It's switching from a camera that would have coax wiring like your old Charter cable connection to the same kind of cabling that's on a computer. And then more storage, of course, because they're higher resolution. So we have a lot of cameras that need to be replaced. Lance mentioned earlier at his work plan, we're working with the city on trying to select and plan for an asset management tool. The city has the first priority on that. They want to get it in for their new water treatment plant and connect it to their SCADA network. What we anticipate doing is selecting a solution that we can use at the city and the county, implementing it for the water utility, then the wastewater utility, and then probably, then we have a bunch of choices, but there's actually 5 different fleets, and most of these products have really good fleet management systems. So we would look at it potentially doing it with the highway fleet, at some point in time, the Parks Department that has a fleet of vehicles, facilities has a fleet of vehicles that they manage. The facility management software that we have needs to be replaced. It's at end of life, so we have a whole bunch of different places we could use this. I'm envisioning selecting a product and then over the course of the next 3 years, asking for funding to do a department and then another department later on and trying to look at eventually making it a nice efficient system where we're using one piece of software and attacking a whole bunch of different pieces of it. So we had 2 demos earlier this week and we have the last one tomorrow. We did an RFP on that, just so you know. A couple of other projects, we'll be continuing to replace switches that are at end of life in this building. We're actually just started replacing our core firewalls. The new ones will be going live February 8th. No, I'm sorry. I think that got moved to the 11th. Of course, we'll be talking about broadband later. I still am spending time working on broadband. Aaron and I will cover that at the next item. The other couple of quick things I'll just do as fast as I can is we're moving to new Microsoft licensing. That's going to give us access to new Microsoft security tools, but we're also striating everybody so that people that need the least amount of Microsoft's licensing. So a highway, one of Jim's guys that are actually field crews, they'll have an email account, but they can only access it with a web interface. That might be like $6 a month, and Jim needs full, Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so Jim might be paying $38 a month or something like that. So we are going through the process of deciding what everybody needs and moving them into the least amount. There's a middle account, and then there's a kind of a high level account. That project we started, and that'll take probably about 4 or 5 months to finish. It's a fairly involved project. I think, Lance, did you mention Regional Forensic Science Center? We are working with the facilities people on making sure all of the cameras and video security and video educational pieces of the Regional Forensic Science Center are in the bid. I've been meeting, my team's been meeting with Troy and the engineers on that regularly, and I think they're trying to get that out for bid in the next couple of weeks. Down at North Central, we will be working on the AB wing with facilities, and then affecting you guys is we're either going to upgrade the iPads or move you guys to Chromebook. We still just started that project of deciding on that. Got other stuff going on, but that's probably the highlights. Any questions on them?
Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? No?
It'll be a full year, and I'm sure new stuff will come in. I always tell Lance, usually by the time I get to my board meeting in October, almost everything we're working on in October, I didn't even know about in January. So there's always stuff coming in. So there'll be stuff coming in all year, I'm sure.
Sure. All right. Thanks for your work on that. All right, moving on then to item C, broadband update. You can take a drink of coffee first.
Start us out.
All right, Supervisor Robinson.
I wanted to give you an update on discussions that we've been having with Bug Tussle. Back in November of 2021, the county board joined with 4 other counties relative to conduit bonding for Bug Tussle that was predicated upon 16 towers and 182 miles of fiber. And then Steve Schneider, the president, went out and met with the towns and promised the world, and he was up to 390 miles of fiber, and they found that they couldn't string it, they had to bury it, and they found rock is expensive, and so they have recalibrated, and we've been having discussions with them relative to a revised route getting back slightly above the original number when we approved it. We'll be trying to finalize those discussions and bringing that to the broadband task force and ultimately this committee. But I think what they found is that it wasn't doable. Costs had gone up for both the materials and others, and I think what we're trying to do is give a better portrayal of what is doable, and again, keeping in mind that when we started this, we were at 182 miles versus 300 plus. So I think this is resizing. We've had some discussions. So look for more work. What Bug Tussle is doing now is they're inventorying. They're doing field audits of what's in place in terms of conduit, fiber, and other things. They're repositioning themselves relative to partnerships, and I think have they finalized the agreement with Michaels, and they're partnering with Michaels, and so they've got the capacity to do 1,000+ miles a year. They will be working on both the fiber connecting the towers and the Cronenwater Knowlton Gunther project in South Central or Marathon County. So that's where, so look for more to come in, and we've been having regular discussions with Bug Tussle relative to that. We're trying to finalize a presentation to the standing committees, and it will be back in March.
So just one question on that. So just to be clear, you're saying that they're going back to what they originally were going to do with a little bit extra, as opposed to the very expansive ideas they started.
They're going back to a project near what the original one is, and we've asked them to share that with Jerry. The numbers keep getting tweaked just a little bit, but they're slightly above where they were. And we were looking at it from the perspective of what does that mean to the county, because on the tower side, we have 6 feet on those towers, plus we have fiber. We have certain strands of fiber in there. So Jerry's been analyzing and having discussions with them relative to what that means. But yes.
So we went from a map of 182 miles, and then it went to 314 or 19. So there's one map. Now there's this other map. Now when we say we're going back to this slimmed down version, which is still more than the first map, what does that map look like? And is it hitting the same areas that it originally was going to hit? Or did they get offline and all of a sudden started putting miles of wire in an area that we originally didn't want? I spoke to someone last night who is a village member in one of the towns and was not very happy with how they said, well, we hit rock and we can't go there. And then they stopped. And now so an area they originally said they were going to do it, they're not doing it. Now, does that mean that area isn't going to get served? I guess that's where I'm going with that.
I think what we're trying to do, Supervisor Dickinson, is get clarity on what can be served realistically. And our agreement with them is that original resolution. It is critical that we identify those areas that can be served before we get into the BEAD program, because we don't want to be showing coverage in areas that it won't be done because we wouldn't be eligible for outside funding. That doesn't mean that Bug Tussle wouldn't come back in and propose to serve that. But what we're trying to do is, I'm going to steal a little bit of the thunder because Aaron Andrews and Jerry have been working with the vendors to appropriately display what's doable, so we can go after the FCC and maps and make sure that they're accurate so that when we go into the BEAD program, we can do it. But I think what we need, I think that Steve Schneider, to his credit, was a great salesman. Steve Schneider, to his discredit, was a great salesman. And the promises, I think he was trying to, after the board had approved it, he was trying to work with the communities to try to extend service. The problem that he had was that he didn't necessarily have a revenue stream associated with it. And the discussions more recently have been, given the fact that the plan was to originally string the fiber versus bury it, the poles were too far apart, so they had to go to burying it. The cost, I think the cost for burying it with the rock were about $3.5 million more. We were concerned, quite honestly, we've had some discussions with them over the low take rate. We were seeing that there was conduit going in the ground, not necessarily fiber, that there weren't connections. It led to discussions. They had some internal discussions, made a number of changes internally, and they have now partnered with somebody that can get the work done. We will need to go out to those communities that thought they were going to be served in those buildings that they thought might be served and make sure that we communicate what the updated map looks like. So we do have that obligation.
And I can Supervisor Dickinson, if you want, I can just tell you the route difference that they are proposing now from the original one, about 2/3 of it is identical, is on the same footprint. And obviously they already put 90 miles in the ground of conduit and fiber. The main difference is that they really had sort of two concentric loops in that when they got to that larger, almost 400-mile map. And so they've gone back to a single loop. And the main difference is from about where Home Depot is in Wausau. The original map had them going out to the industrial park, the Wausau Business Park, and then out to Edgar, and then out to Stratford, and on a path that kind of geographically looks just like that, straight out. And now they're going to go to get over to Stratford. They're going to use their connection in Mosinee and come over from Mosinee. So it's probably about the same amount of length, and it's probably the same number of houses served on the piece that they swapped out. I haven't seen details on the number of connections, but that's the difference in the map. The rest of it is about the same. So, going from Stratford to Abbotsford, Athens, Hamburg, Town of Maine, out to the east side of the county, and then back down to about where the Central Wisconsin Airport is. That was on the original map. And so now what they're doing is they're disconnecting the piece from the Wausau Business Park out to Stratford and replacing it with the one from Mosinee to Stratford.
All right, thank you.
The next piece, if I may, is ask Aaron to talk a little bit about what we're doing with the maps. We've been working with Preston. We have a couple of challenges we're going to likely submit, and then an update. She can give you an update on the BEAD grant.
Thanks, Jerry. We are currently working on identifying the areas with Preston that we know are underserved or unserved, and coordinating that with the maps to make sure that it's accurate. We'll be issuing some challenges because some areas are showing full service when they are not on the map, so we have to get all that teed up. We're kind of in a holding pattern for two reasons. One is the PSC is waiting for approval of their first, they call it Volume 1, their first submission to the NTIA. Once that gets approved, the clocks start ticking. So what'll happen is they'll release their map, and we'll have 30 days to issue challenges, which we pretty much have ready to go. And then what happens is the ISPs have 30 days to rebut the challenges that we have. And then after that, we start moving forward with grant applications. So The BEAD process is kind of in hold, but there's quite a bit of stuff we can do on the front end to get ready, and including identifying areas that the maps show are served but are not. So we were reviewing that yesterday, and we think there's about 15,000 that are underserved or unserved. We pulled that up on a map. It's unfortunately scattered all around the county, but what we're starting to do is prioritize certain areas so that we can present this to the ISPs and say, okay, here's an area we'd like to see you focus on. Here's an area, and sort of allow them to see where their footprint is, and identify what makes sense for them to apply for those grants. Let's see. That we're planning on meeting with them. As soon as we get going with the PSC, then we'll be able to set this date because we'll know what areas there are. The other thing I'm working on is updating the website, the county website, so it has some broadband information for people. That was started several years ago with my predecessor, but kind of fell off the wayside because there wasn't anybody to maintain it. So I'm going to start working with Sarah in communications on developing a landing page for community members to go to and identify. We're not quite sure what it's going to look like yet, but sort of let them run a speed test. Also look at where other providers are in their area. So if they type in their address, perhaps they can see where their opportunities are to get service. Am I missing anything? You want to talk? Oh, yeah. So right around the time I started, there was, it's RDOF, right?
No,
Oh, the state PSC grants, right. So Frontier and Charter applied for 5 different areas 5 different grant applications to get coverage. PSC has not gotten back to them on that. There was, but they anticipate getting back to them on that prior to opening up the BEAD process. So we will know if those areas receive funding. And if they don't, which we don't anticipate all 5 will, because there was an enormous number of applications for a relatively small pool of money. So we think we might get 1 or 2 out of those 5. But those areas that were applied for under the PSC process, if they are denied, we will put right back in for a BEAD grant. I'm also getting calls, and I'll encourage people to call me and contact me if they are looking for service. It's not that I can provide it, but I can help direct them to where they might go for service, or at least give them some sort of a timeline of when that's going to happen.
Very good. Thanks for the update. Yep. Questions, comments? All right. Yeah, thank you again for that. It is what it is. Thanks for the work you're doing. And we'll move on from that, I guess. All right. Item 8, next meeting date and time, announcements and future agenda items. If anyone has any ideas for future agenda items now, you can present them. If not, always send the email. Do you have Commissioner Griesbach?
Just a reminder, currently I do have confirmed with Senator Tomczyk to come talk about the state RMA, and also a representative from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation will be here. His schedule can change quite a bit, but as of now, we are on his schedule for the March meeting, so that might take up a good chunk of the time.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anything else? All right, our next meeting is Thursday, March 7th at 9 a.m. Item 9. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Supervisor Robinson, Supervisor Soibert. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. Have a good day.